Okay, so I am interviewing the My American Story project. So how about I have some questions for you? The basic questions, there's 6 basic questions, and I'm going to hopefully think of some follow-up questions.
Okay.
So the first question is, how was life different when you were a kid?
Different from now?
Yeah.
Like how is life different for me, or different for the world, or
how is the world different, I think?
Okay, well, so the world was, when I was a kid, this was during the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
So the Soviet Union and the United States were the 2 superpowers of the world, and so people were always talking about how maybe there's going to be some kind of nuclear war, or at least there'd be some sort of competition. When I was, so this is in the 1980s, when I was little, I do remember hearing about things like Project Star Wars, where President Reagan wanted to create a network of satellites with lasers that would shoot down any nuclear weapons that Russia would send to us, the Soviet Union would send to us, with that would go into space. Mm-hmm. So we would shoot those things down. And I didn't know what, space lasers would really be like. So just in my mind, I remember thinking, oh, it's like we have a bunch of Death Stars up there.
Yes.
Seems crazy.
Purely defensive, of course. Of course.
So I remember, I don't know how old I was exactly, 6, 7, 8 maybe. I remember on TV the fall of the Berlin Wall. So this is the collapse, essentially, of the Soviet Union. I remember my dad calling me over and telling me, you're going to remember this. And I didn't really understand what it meant for these people to be, kicking this wall, breaking this wall, that sort of thing. But I remember all of a sudden, all of that activity, just all those people talking about maybe the world's going to end because of nuclear weapons and stuff, and that's just, it stopped being such a big topic. And that was good, because my dad was in the Marine Corps, and he worked at the Marine Corps recruiting depot in downtown San Diego, a place called, we would refer to it as MCRD, where Marines would train and stuff like that, Camp Pendleton. So he'd work over there, and I was always concerned that maybe they would send him away again. And when I was little, they did send him to places like Japan and Okinawa, where he got to train up around 1,000 people.
That's a lot.
On aircraft carriers and stuff, for possible action out there. Anyway, after the fall of the Soviet Union, one thing became very, very clear. In San Diego, one of the big employers, like out here, it's a bunch of tech companies, but in San Diego, one of the major set of employers were all related to defense. This particular one was called General Dynamics, and they had a big factory thing sort of along the San Diego Bay. And I remember seeing it because we would always drive by it in order to go to like Disneyland or things like that. Okay, so we would drive by this. Oh no, we would go to the grocery store on the naval base, the U.S. Navy base, and so we would drive by that thing pretty frequently. It was around a half-hour drive to go from home to the Navy base, and sometime after the Soviet Union collapsed, that place shut down. And so a lot of people, a lot of the fathers of my friends suddenly became unemployed. People who were welders, and like my best friend in high school, his father had been laid off as a welder from General Dynamics. And he was going to retire with a very nice package, but when they let him go, they just let him go. So he had to figure out something quite different. So there were a lot of parents and kids who went from the world is going to end, right? And the Soviet Union collapsed, and we were all happy. But for some of these people, their worlds ended instead.
Financially.
Well, financially, yes, but those fathers were really defined by what they did, by their work, and they couldn't do that work because all of the airplane manufacturing companies were shutting down. We don't need to have all of these war things if there's no war. Which makes sense, but it did cause a lot of trouble. So in my area of San Diego, it suddenly became a lot less wealthy. There was more crime. There were a lot more problems. Seemingly all of a sudden, because San Diego was such a strongly military town. And when they didn't need the military anymore, they didn't do a good job at shutting that thing down. But also, they didn't do a good job at taking care of all the people who were helping the military
do their jobs.
Right.
And they didn't have a job anymore because that was what they were trained to do. And then...
Yeah. So you just imagine, like, the place where you're at, all of your friends, suddenly, their lives at home got a lot harder. And things that they used to be able to do, vacations they used to be able to do, or to go to different restaurants and stuff, all of a sudden that stuff's just gone. So that was not good. It was good that the world was not going to end from nuclear fire, but it was also not good the way that things went so poorly for these kids.
Perhaps the U.S. should have, settled.
Should have helped those families. But they don't count as military. And so that's a tricky thing. It's a very tricky thing.
Especially with capitalism.
So that's one really big difference. The Soviet Union ended. But another big thing that happened was that it's more about me. I wanted to go be like a fighter pilot. But because of lots of problems brought on in part because of the fall of the Soviet Union, my dad got a divorce with my mom. He left when I was in 5th grade.
Why?
He had a lot of problems. Stemming in part from the war in Vietnam, and some of the stuff of training people for years on end on these aircraft carriers, then coming back and spending a little bit of time at home and going out and doing it again. People miss the routine. And they don't know what to do with themselves when they're not a soldier. So he had trouble reinventing himself, and when he finished trying to reinvent himself, he decided that we were not part of that reinvention. So he left, and we got really poor. Really, really poor.
When was that?
So when I was like 10 or 11. So almost 30 years ago. Yeah, so in the 90s, that's what happened. And so I went from wanting to become a fighter pilot to helping out Grandma Twee to try to earn some extra money. And so we worked on she had heard that computers were going to become a big thing.
Which they have.
Which they ended up doing, but it wasn't super clear why every person needed to have a computer. But she went to night school. She worked during the day for 2 different stores, and then at night she went to school to learn how to fix computers. But she was so tired by the time that she finished all that stuff, she hadn't really retained much of the material. But she was able to bring home some of those broken computers, and the place made a promise. The class made a promise. Hey, you can keep the computer if you fix it. And so, while Grandma Twee knew how to fix some of the parts, she was just so tired, and so she left out the manuals for how to do this stuff, right? The books on how to do this. And I read those books because I was really good at reading.
Good.
Right? Just like you. I was really fast at reading, really good at reading. And so I read through that stuff. I learned weird things like base 16 math and all this weird stuff. And so I figured out how to fix some of those computers. And so we suddenly had computers around, which were not very useful. You could just type into them. They didn't display any pictures. It was all very primitive. But it was cool. We had our own computers. Unfortunately, those early computers also emitted a ton of radiation when I would go, open up the monitors, the displays.
Oh,
TV piece. Yeah.
So now you have a bunch.
They didn't put a lot of that stuff in the books, so.
Now you have a bunch of radiation in your blood.
So, over the course of a few months, my eyes suddenly became not very good. And so I needed to fix some more computers to pay for glasses.
But then your eyes get worse, so you need...
Yeah. And more importantly, at the time, the Air Force did not accept anyone who had poor eyesight into their pilot program.
Makes sense, because you have to see with your eyeballs.
These days they use lasers to reshape your eyes. Yeah, that's allowed. But back then, that was experimental, and they were not clear if you could pilot a fighter jet, which has much higher G-forces than normal aircraft. Anyway, so suddenly, instead of becoming a pilot, now I am fixing computers and going to school. And I definitely can't become a pilot. So, okay, that is really disappointing. And
the
then
collapsing of your dreams.
Yeah. By the time that I get in high school, I am very good at fixing these computers, at setting things up. People are paying me a lot, and I'm able to contribute towards the household budget for food and stuff. So so that was really good. And I made enough money from that. From selling each one of these things, I would make maybe $100. Okay. And so I probably made and sold. I probably made or sold maybe 100 computers, or
so that would be about $1,000.
100 computers. So that would be not $1,000. That would be $10,000.
That's a lot.
Yeah, but that's over several years. That's like over the entirety of high school, right? Anyway, I made enough money that, in addition to paying for food, for some of our utilities like our water bill, there was a big drought. There was always a big drought in San Diego, and it was always super hot and stuff. We didn't have air conditioning, and we couldn't pay for too much water. Anyway, with this extra money, we could pay for some of those nice things, like being able to flush the toilets, and which is good.
Because you did not like unflushing toilets.
No, you had to go outside.
Yes.
You had to go outside and dig a hole. Yeah, it was
fun.
We had plumbing and toilets, but you could only use them
if you had water.
If you really needed it. You could only use it only so many times per week. All the other times you have to go outside. So that was not good, not fun. Anyway, I learned how to fix those computers. We made a bunch of money. I was able to contribute some of that money towards the household. Some of the money we saved for college. Some of the money I spent to build even bigger computers for myself. No, just for myself. And then I could play games and stuff like that, and it was good. It was real good.
Didn't you get like a farm and chickens and stuff?
Yeah, I also lived on a little urban farm. So we didn't have enough land for horses, but we had enough land for chickens and turkeys and goats, and we had a bunch of fruit trees.
And the turtles.
And we had turtles, tortoises, geese, ducks, and we would get eggs from the chickens. We had guinea hens. We had turkeys just for fun. They were pets, not food. Yeah. The guinea hens would protect against snakes.
The guinea hens are terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. One of them was called, we had two. One was called Uni, and the other one was called Corn. Because they both have these little horns that stick out from their forehead.
Oh dear.
That's just how
guinea
hens are.
Guinea horns are.
Yep. So, so yeah, we got to have some food that way. We would trade some of those eggs for vegetables and stuff. Other vegetables we grew in the backyard. And we got fruit from the fruit trees. Probably most of our water went to feeding those trees. But overall, that was probably a good deal.
That was a good investment.
Yes, because the fruit would cost too much money. And every summer, some of that computer money would go towards buying mangoes, my very favorite treat. So we'd have mangoes from the naval base, because they'd have nice discounts and stuff. You didn't have to pay taxes at the naval base, which is much nicer.
Which sounds like a very good place to start building a black market, which I'm sure never happened. No.
So, so then I got to go to college, and going to college meant that I had to get a scholarship, and that scholarship, I applied to a lot of different places. My mom pushed me to apply to different places, and I got a scholarship from Bill Gates, the former CEO of Microsoft.
Wow.
And with it, I could go to any place that I wanted. So long as I picked something in engineering, then they would just pay. And so then I needed to pick something in engineering. And I thought, well, engineering's cool because that's kind of like inventing, and that's something I'm really interested in. But I don't know what to pick. The one thing I don't want to do, though, is work on computers, because they're really complicated and they always have problems. I don't want to work on computers. So I used Magic 8 Ball to select, and I know I tell this to people from time to time and they don't believe me, but I really honestly used a Magic 8 Ball to pick
what you would do
what I would do, and I applied to several different universities, and each one I had a different thing I would pick. And I got into two of them. One was a place called Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in Arizona, and they have the largest fleet of aircraft in the United States. So if maybe I can't become a fighter pilot, but most of the students there learn how to fly airplanes. And so that would be cool. But their engineering programs, all of their engineering programs have to be certified by this national organization in order for it to count. And they said, well, ours is not yet accredited, certified, but it will be by the time you graduate. And I thought, but what if it's not? Then I'm going to have to pay back all this money to Bill Gates, and I won't have that money. So I shouldn't do that. And the other place I got into was Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. And so I went to Cal Poly. And at Cal Poly, Magic 8 Ball said electrical engineering.
And then you went into computer fixing. Clearly your morals were compromised by the Magic 8 Ball.
So I got electrical engineering, and I really hated it. I was not good at most of it, except for one little piece, electromagnetics. I was good at math, and I was good at this one part of physics. Not most of the physics I wasn't good at, but at this one part I was good at. And by the time that I graduated from Cal Poly, the Gates Foundation said that I could go to graduate school if I wanted to. They pay for that too. As long as I keep going to school, then they would pay. As long as it was engineering. And so I got into Ohio State University, and I decided to work on the thing that seemed the most like magic, which was antennas, electromagnetic theory. And so I went to there, and I learned that we don't know how antennas work, which is very disappointing after 3 years of very hard study. But I got my PhD over there. And I should have said, while I was in college at Cal Poly, I was able to get an internship, like a trial job, temporary job during the summer at Apple, because all of my friends at other universities were learning how to program computers, but at Cal Poly we weren't. And so I thought, well, I should probably do that, because when I get out, I'm going to have to compete with all of these other people who already know how to program computers, but I don't. I only know how to fix them. And so I got a job with this one guy, Bill, and Bill really liked me. I made a lot of different computer programs there. Did a lot of engineering, and I came back every year for 3 years, and I had to stop that when I was at Ohio State in order to protect the secret of the iPhone.
The magical secret.
Yeah.
iPhone.
Yep. Then you were born.
Well, then you went to Spain.
I went to Spain while I was at Cal Poly, while I was earning money from Apple. I used that money to go to Spain, and then I got, we dated for a few years, and then we got married, and then we had you, and then we had Lucia, and then I graduated from Ohio State just after the economy had completely crashed.
Yes, such a good time to be out of school.
Yeah. But my old boss at Bill at Apple said, hey, you can come over here as long as you know that we're going to ask you to do the computer thing again. I said, well, it was a lot of fun the first time, so sure. And that's what I do. I do computer stuff. My hobby is my job, and my PhD gave me a bunch of books.
Well, technically your hobby is playing games with us.
Well, my hobby as a kid
became your job.
Became my job. And I didn't want that job. I didn't want that hobby. I didn't want that job because I didn't like fixing computers. And the only reason why I had to fix computers is for the money. And I thought it would be kind of cool to have a computer. That was before I understood what they were. They're very troublesome things.
Yes. Very demanding, are you not?
Yeah. But now I get to design what the next computers over the next 10 years will be for everybody else. And somebody else has to fix it.
Good.
Yeah. So, went from San Diego that was under threat of nuclear annihilation to the Soviet Union collapsed, but then everybody got a lot poorer, and then my dad left, and then we needed money, and so I worked on fixing computers, which damaged my vision, so I couldn't do the pilot thing.
Which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah. And then...
Thank you, radiation. Thank you.
Yeah. And then I was able to use that knowledge along with some of the things that I was actually good at Cal Poly in order to get that internship.
And make the good friend of Bill.
to make a good friend of Bill, and then that those interests of what was magical and mysterious led me to get that PhD, marry Mama, have you guys, and that friendship with Bill let me come back to Apple and do a far more advanced thing of what I was doing in 6th grade.
Good. What was your dad's name anyway?
Dennis.
Is that why your middle name is Dennis?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
After him?
Yep. Dennis Raines. Yep.
Okay, so, well, that kind of, the second question was, what did you do for fun? But you kind of just answered that with the...
No. So remember, I wasn't doing that.
You were not doing the computers for fun, you were doing them for money?
At first it was fun, but you have to understand that computers on the inside, especially back then, they had all of these they looked like little cities. And it was really cool until you realized that all of those computer chips, like when a computer would break, it'd be that some of the chips were broken or damaged, and you had to replace them.
And then you have to examine every single thing.
Yeah, you gotta check all the chips. And when you identify, oh, that chip's broken, you have to pull it out.
Which is hard.
But you have to pull it out in this tiny little space, which was good because my hands were small because I was just a kid. But it's between two circuit boards. The back side of a circuit board consists of a bunch of sharp, pointy, shiny pieces of metal. It's these solder points. And so I would pull out a chip using a special tool, but I would pull it out real hard, and then my knuckles would scrape against the it's like
a barb,
like a whole bunch of barbs, and would just dig into my hand.
And then you would not like it.
And then it turned out that I actually didn't very much like fixing computers because they always hurt me. So I'd wear gloves, but you had to be very careful about the gloves because the gloves could cause static electricity, which would damage more of the chips. More things they didn't put in the book. Yeah. So it just became very fiddly. But it made a lot more money than my mom could actually earn over hours and hours at work. So it was still a good thing for us to do. But to be clear, it was not fun. Not fun.
After the first few times.
Yeah, after the first few times. For fun, we had this big hill in the backyard, and it was covered in all these trees, and so I'd run out there, and I would pretend to be a soldier in the jungle, and I'd go through the trees, like climbing through the trees and stuff. And I'd still do that even though I was really allergic to all of the spider bites and stuff that were just hanging out in those trees. And some of those spiders were big, like this big. Yellow and black. It's like...
bad pattern.
Yeah, bad patterns. Yeah. It turns out they still bite you if you punch them. But I guess it's not so much with the venom. I don't know. I had a lot of different reactions. So I would play soldier. I had like toy guns and stuff. Sometimes my friends would come over and we'd play toy soldier and we'd run up and down the hill and stuff like that.
And then you'd have a seizure of allergic reactions all reacting with each other.
No, it's just that stuff would bite me on my joints and then my joints would seize up.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
And then
I'd have to wait for a week for the joints to stop being so swollen. It wasn't good. But I would protect the animals and be
Other than
nice and
spiders.
stuff. But the spiders deserve the punching.
Well, did they deserve punching, or did you deserve biting? Because you were there in their home, messing up their
But it was my jungle.
Yes. It was totally your jungle. You had
Yep.
the deeds to it, of course.
Yeah. So that's what I do. And then other times I would ride my bike around the cul-de-sac. I lived in a cul-de-sac on Berryland Court. So I'd ride around this big cul-de-sac with my bike. And sometimes I do that with my sister too. Your Aunt Julie. And then finally I would go to the library. Later on, when I knew more about computers, I'd volunteer at the library to teach old people how to use computers and search for things on the internet. This is all before Google. It was more complicated then.
Yeah.
But I'd be at the library and I would read I'd read different like choose your own adventure kind of books.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because basically, literally everything, like even the video games, which choose your own adventure anyway.
And Star Wars books and Jurassic Park and lots of different lots of different books there. Magic trick books, I love that. Ventriloquism.
Projecting
puppets.
noise across the room.
Yeah. Well, I still like
And
doing
doing
puppets
the
today.
creepy Victor dolls.
Oh, and it's like how to build those. It was pretty crazy. I didn't have any money to do that stuff, but
But just in case.
yeah. So I would do that stuff. Generally, I was pretty busy though with the computer stuff, doing the homework, and watering the bazillion plants. There's a lot of plants. It takes so long to do that, and you have to do that every day, and feed the chickens.
Oh yeah, you had to leave tortillas in the sun and break them into little bits and then feed it to the chickens, and the chickens would do something weird and we'd have to.
Well, because we didn't have money for it, we'd go over to like trash cans at the end of the day of the Mexican restaurants, and they would throw out all of these tortillas that they'd made that day because they only sold fresh tortillas.
Good policy.
And so we would get those tortillas and then bring them home, and I would just have to lay them all out onto the concrete in the backyard. Just a lot of tortillas, and then we'd let the sun bake them, and then I would have to crumple them into basically tortilla chips and then feed those tortilla chips to the chickens. Yep. And give them water and stuff. We had a bunch of dogs and birds.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you had a bunch of dogs, and you had those turtles that you went into your neighbors' yards to feed, but the June bugs, which are drunken June bugs, very important.
Anyway, so stuff I do for fun: run around, playing soldier, ride my bike, and read books at the library. Now, on very special occasions, like a birthday, I could go to a store at the mall called Walden Books, and we would pick out a book to buy, and I'd be able to have that book at home. So I had a small collection of books. These days,
We can do this much,
we have many more books,
which is good.
because both Mama and Papa
Like books.
really like books, and for both of us, we did not have enough books when we were little.
Starved for information.
Yep. And you really liked books when you were a baby.
So I did. I still do.
Yep.
Number 3 is which events in your life were major turning points? I'm pretty sure you already answered that. When did you marry Mama again?
We got married. We got married in 2007.
So a little bit before I was born. Okay. The 4th question is, what changes in life conditions or technology affected you, and in what ways?
Well, I think that for me, computers have really been the primary technology that changed things. So there was, when I started, the school would give my mom old computers, very old computers from the 1970s to fix, and that's what I'd use so that's what I would use, and then I'd use those old computers, sell some of those, buy newer computers from just before I was born, and those were definitely better than those earlier computers. And so it was interesting because we didn't have quite enough money for doing this stuff. Oh, and you had to like buy a newer computer in order to figure out how to fix it. So for me, although I started fixing these things later, right, in the 1990s, for me, I experienced computers as other people would have experienced them, but in a shorter period of time, starting from the 1970s. And as I got more money for this, right, I would go from the 70s to the 80s to the 90s, and eventually catch up to the present. And so there were these computers that I remember figuring out how to download games by connecting the computer to a phone line, looking in a magazine, dialing a phone number, and I could talk to a computer on the other end of that phone line, and I could download games. It wasn't the internet, and it took like a day to download these things, but I could do it. And it was really amazing. And I remember thinking, wow, so if I could just get the phone number for every computer, if most computers were connected to these phone lines, it would be great. And then later on I learned about the internet, which had existed all this time. But remember, for me, it's like I'm in a time machine or something. It's like I was, as far as computers are concerned, it was like I was born in the 1960s and I started using computers when I was 10. It's like that. And so I'm experiencing what these computers are like, but it's like every couple of months I get to move to a new one. So for me, it felt like technology was moving really fast, super fast. And all of a sudden, boom, I've got the internet. I don't have the internet because it costs a lot of money, but I could interact with the internet at other people's houses. I could see, wow, look at this. And a color monitor, and there are like pictures on the internet, and there's just stuff.
Was there Giggle yet? No, there was not.
Huh?
I said, I asked whether there was Giggle yet, and answered my own question because you already told me that Giggle didn't exist yet.
Google.
Yeah.
Yeah, Google did not exist. there were other things there, but it did not exist. So, the internet was a big deal, and there were companies that would actually send you in the mail little discs that you could put into your computer, and you put that in, and it would give you 50 free hours on the internet, and then you'd have to pay. But they sent them out somewhat frequently, and so you just they would require you to put in a name, and I would just invent new names. So I had lots of hours of the internet stockpiled, and lots of different, what is formerly called aliases. Highly illegal to do this, really, but I didn't know.
'Tis not a sin nor a crime till you know it's a sin or a crime.
Well, I knew that if I put in my actual name, then it wouldn't work. If I put in any of the old names, then it wouldn't work. So I just make up new names. Yeah. So the internet was a big deal because it felt like suddenly I was connected with lots of other people. Maybe. Still wasn't super clear how that worked. Because really I worked on the computer hardware, not on the software. So that was a big deal. At the same time as all this other stuff is going on, I remember us getting cable TV. And so there was one particular night where we went from having 3 or 4 channels on TV to having 60 channels, around 60 channels.
That's a big difference.
Yeah, it was a really big difference.
What were the original, 3 or 4?
What was the original what?
3 or 4 channels.
There were local channels, so sometimes they would show the news, sometimes they would show sports, sometimes they'd show TV shows, and they would have, there was like a channel, 2 channels from San Diego, a channel from Los Angeles. This was over a cable, like we paid for this, but it wasn't much. And then all of a sudden we had all this stuff, and there was even a channel that was dedicated to just playing music. It's called MTV. That was big. Yeah. So I remember that. That was really big. Suddenly with the internet and with cable TV, you could probably find stuff that you in particular were interested in at any time, as opposed to before, where you just kind of saw what you saw, did what happened, read what you couldn't read, but you didn't have any choice in it. Right?
You just had to time it right.
Well, if you watch this channel at this time, then you can see Transformers.
Which is
But if you don't get up at that time, no Transformers for you. It's too bad. No Transformers, no Power Rangers, no anything.
Are you ashamed of having liked Power Rangers?
No, I like Power Rangers. You like Power Rangers too.
I used to, I don't anymore.
Those were important technological things. Going to college meant that I had high-speed internet, very fast internet.
Well, comparative.
No, it was very fast. It was very, very fast internet. Even compared to now, it was fast. So that was really great. And then I could see, oh, look, you could play over the internet with other people. things like that I knew were technically possible, but you had to have a much faster internet connection.
Because of all of the input that the game would be getting from the various players.
That's right. And you have to do that fast.
Multiplayer games are hard to coordinate.
Yeah. So, those were really important technological things that happened. I know that cars and stuff changed during this time, but we didn't really always had old cars, so it didn't really matter. The computers I could experience, the internet and TVs, those are all things that really change actually a lot.
Okay, so the fifth question is, how do you define your cultural identity today? Has your cultural identity changed during your life?
Yeah. So, as you know, Grandma Twee is from Vietnam. But it's a weird thing. We can say that she's from Vietnam, but her country doesn't exist anymore. Because she was from South Vietnam.
Which got annexed.
Which was invaded by people in the North in their Civil War, right? So the South lost, and those people fled to lots of parts of the world. But there's a big enclave in San Diego and in San Jose and some in Los Angeles. So there were Vietnamese people who were around, but my papa, he didn't want me to learn Vietnamese.
Why?
Because a lot of people didn't like that the United States was involved in Vietnam, that we had tried to help those people. There were selfish reasons why the United States was involved too, but still, they didn't like that. They didn't much care for the soldiers and stuff that were involved with that. So he didn't want me to value that Vietnamese heritage.
Which is really not a right thing to say to a small child. You can't learn your mom's language because...
it was okay. Like, it was... I didn't know. I didn't know any better. So I wanted to learn more about my father's heritage, and he had two different sort of branches. There's two different threads there. He and I now, we are members of the Choctaw Nation, this Native American tribe in Oklahoma, because our family line had those people in it, and the government recorded it. So that's good. So they're the Choctaw. And then there's he came from southern Oklahoma, right at the border between Oklahoma and Texas. And so for him, he's always identified as being a Texan. And so and Texans are very different from others. So stereotypically. And so there's, he always spoke with a sort of southern twang and a little different accent. Sometimes, especially if I'm around people from the South, my southern accent will come out.
That is
some of the things, some of the ways that I pronounce words are influenced by that. And so growing up, I really identified more as a Texan and as a Native American than as a Vietnamese person. And in truth, I was in San Diego as a San Diegan, surrounded by people of Spanish descent, or people from Latin America, right? And so I also really, really loved all of the Spanish that people spoke. Even if I didn't understand all of it, it was still just soothing to me. There were also a lot of other Filipino families there, and a lot of people who sort of found themselves at the home base of the Pacific Naval Fleet. As I've gotten older, so my point there is that as a kid, it was actually very confusing. Who am I really? I'm not actually for real a Texan because we don't live there.
Clearly, we do not live there.
I'm not really a Native American because I don't live on a reservation. I can't speak the language. We're really far away from the tribe itself. There aren't really other Choctaw around us. So that's kind of hard. Vietnam, the Vietnam that my mom knew is gone. It's eradicated, right? And so what does it mean for me to be here? Well, I guess I'm an American, and I really wanted to play up the part of being American that comes from white America. But there were a lot of people who would rudely point out that I was not that. But I would really just want to focus on that. As I've gotten older, I appreciate more me being Asian. I've gotten somewhat closer to maybe not exactly my specific Native American roots, but understanding more about Native Americans in general, and some of the history of the Choctaw Nation, right? To just become a little closer with that. That's something you can do too.
And I intend to.
But maybe more than all of that cultural identity, I think after I married your mama, I felt a lot more comfortable with saying being an American in part means celebrating the many different ingredients that each family, each person is made up of, as opposed to trying to pick the biggest things, right? Like, oh, I am 50% Vietnamese, so that means that 50% of the time I should be thinking about Vietnamese stuff. No, there are Vietnamese people here who don't have that accent because they grew up here, but they're trying to figure out how to be Vietnamese in the United States, and that's cool. That's okay. You can read about those people. You can learn more about them. So I think from my time as a kid, really focused on figuring out how to be a white American, to now, where I think about all of the different things that are woven together to make who I am. So my cultural identity definitely has changed. I was proud of being an American then, I'm proud of being an American now, but my sense of what an American is
has
changed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's no longer just the whites, it is people who live in America, no matter who they may be. Number 6 is, what do you have to say from your generation to this generation about American history or American identity?
America it hasn't been around for a lot of time, but it is very complicated.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I think people spend a lot of time studying how the country was founded, which is fine. Understanding the 20th century, when I grew up, I think people still live with the effects of the Cold War, of the United States being a superpower, even today, and all of the complexities of how being an American, when the United States has created an empire of sorts in sort of a mixture of altruistic reasons and very selfish reasons. It makes for something that's pretty complicated. America is easily criticized for all of that stuff. But I also think about the alternatives. There have been a lot of different alternatives. Whole branches of the family tree eradicated by those alternatives, right? I guess I'd say America is something that's continuing to evolve and change, and you have the responsibility and the joy of actually making it better than what it is, and figuring out how the United States can work together, and being an American, how being an American among other countries in the world can become more often a good thing, instead of, well, there was that time that we saved the world a few different times, and then there were the times where we caused a bunch of really bad stuff, right?
Like all of the...
And the thing of it is...
collapsed countries from the Cold War and stuff.
The thing of it is, like, all of that bad stuff, the times when bad stuff has happened, that's actually meant that the United States is ordinary. But the times when we've been able to come together, all of these different peoples of the world represented in the United States, this Babylon, and we do stuff that's extraordinary. That stuff is less likely to happen elsewhere. So when the United States messes up, well, that's just being a country.
What would you define as an ordinary country? Because normality is simply what most things are at the moment. There isn't a universal standard.
Normality is just the usual human behavior. So the United States gets attacked, the United States responds with military. That's happened over many, many years. And that's, why World War I happened. Because one country got attacked and a bunch of other countries had to get involved, and it's all ordinary. Terribly ordinary, right? People being short-sighted.
Mm.
But then there are these moments where the United States or the Soviet Union or other countries, they could have, they see things more clearly. They say, well, we could go to war on this, or we could talk to the other country and charge them some money, basically, but create trade, and that trade could stabilize the politics that are happening right now. Will strengthen the bonds between the United States and other countries, right? I think the pandemic, with the two most effective vaccines against COVID, is it great that those two vaccines haven't really been a big factor outside of the United States? Yeah, that's pretty bad. But that comes from the work of immigrants who fled their countries and came here and found homes and were comfortable enough creating things here. And I'm not just saying that to sort of rah, hooray the United States. I'm saying that the United States has a ton of those stories. That makes this place special. When people act greedy, well, welcome to humanity. But when people act, when Americans contribute significantly to save the world, time and time again, when Americans donate more money than just about any other country, we donate more money per capita, per person in the United States than any other country in the world. We also spend more on our military than any other country in the world by a lot. So maybe it's just, we have a lot more money. But being ordinary would be spending lots of money on your military and not giving away extra money to poor people around the world. That would be ordinary. But we actually do spend money. We give money to other people. So Theo, the bottom line is, the United States, it is a place where extraordinary things can happen. And we all have to actually care about how the government works in order to make it more often extraordinary rather than just ordinary.
So I'm gonna stop now because Soundtrap says that we need to stop because going on longer is risking losing information. Yes.